Welcome to another edition of Altitude Advantage. I am your host and team reporter, Elisa Hernandez. Here in the podcast studio across the table is our lead writer on DenverBroncos.com, Aric DiLalla, and it is Dub Day. Bum, 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 bum. We need like some music, sound effects, some noise.
Woo!
There you go. It is Dub Day because the Broncos were able to knock off the Dallas Cowboys 44-24 at Empower Field at Mile High. In the throwbacks, you know, honestly, I think every time we're the throwbacks, I just expect something special to happen. And we saw a lot of that. We're going to talk about the win, some takeaways there, the play of Bo Nix, Troy Franklin, how the rookies showed up, as well as a defensive performance, and so much more as we kick off this episode. So I know, you know, after the games, you sit there in the dark at the stadium, at the 50-yard line on the field. I don't know if you saw when. I don't think you were there. Yeah, the lights just complete. Yeah, I figured that's when you went down there.
That was me yelling.
Your Zen moment on the field. You always take a moment to look back at this game, but I mean, the Broncos improved to 6-2, still atop the AFC West, and protected home field advantage, which is exactly what this team wants to do. Is play really hard at home. But what were your takeaways from the win? How are you feeling on this Dub Day? Rocking throwbacks, feeling good?
I'm feeling good. How can you not feel good at 6-2? This Broncos team has now won 5 in a row, 9 in a row at home. And I think you're getting to the point where, yeah, you can talk about the quality of some of the opponents. A winless Jets team, a Giants team below 500, a Cowboys team that was
a win is a win,
right out 500. Well, yeah, and you don't stack 5 wins unless you're playing decent football and you're making big time plays. And so I think I said, I can't remember if I said it on the pod going into the game, but like a win over the Cowboys was going to change my perception a little bit of this team and just affirm what I thought I knew about this team, and that, hey, this is really a team that's geared up, I think, to make a run at the division and then see kind of what happens next. But the way that they were able to win this football game in dominant, convincing fashion, really from the jump after the interception, you get the goal line stop, you go down and score a touchdown, get a stop and score again, and boom, it's like off to the races. And the Cowboys cut it to 4 and then to 10 in the second half. But really, every time the Broncos needed to make a play, they made a play, and we'll get to that offensively, just how impressive that was. But I think, again, big picture, this was the number one offense in football, and it was like, okay, here's a chance for this team to make a statement, and they did that. And there's going to be tougher tests, but I think the convincing nature of how the Broncos won this one, it's just got me thinking about, like, what is the potential of this team? Because when the offense can play at that level, when Bo Nix can play at that level, if the defense can limit the best offense in football, arguably, or at least it was playing like that with all those weapons, hold them to effectively 17 points when Dak Prescott gets benched. Man, what are the limits of this team in an AFC that is super crowded right now? Only one team has fewer losses than the Broncos, and the Colts are 6-1, or excuse me, 7-1. The Broncos are 6-2. They're right there. This is a team that I think fans that watch the Broncos and me, like, we still are getting used to this new reality after so long of struggling. Last year is a tough start to the season. You rally back, make the playoffs, kind of, you get in as a wild card, but you're not able to stay in that game against Buffalo. This is a different team with different expectations, and it's playing at a different level, and truly a top-level defense, an offense that has weapons now. We'll talk about some of those guys and how they showed up, a quarterback that's playing at a high level. And, every week I go into the game, and it's such a week-to-week league that you're like, what's going to happen? And there's this anxiety for me every week of, like, can they pull it out? Can they win? And I think we're getting to the point where you've got to recognize, like, this is a good football team that is going to be in the mix all season long. We're about at the halfway point. But, like, I fully expect the Broncos to – you look on the schedule now, and it's like, okay, fully expect them to be in a game against Houston, fully expect them to be in a game at home against Kansas City. Green Bay comes here. Like, that should be a great game. Yeah. And you no longer look at the schedule and think, man, it's going to be really tough for the Broncos. It doesn't mean they're not going to lose again. It doesn't mean there aren't going to be tough games, but this team is playing at a level now and has the potential that I think they truly can beat anybody on their schedule. And that's exciting for not just this year, but for the future as, Bo Nix and Sean Payton continue to develop that connection and this thing continues to move forward. But man, it's like we've unlocked this like new opportunity and kind of like what's possible. It's like you've unlocked the next level in a video game or something and you're going on. And I also want to make sure, I heard this on some national podcast I was listening to of like, oh, well, it doesn't prove much to me about the Broncos that they beat the Cowboys, but it was nice to see them kind of dominate the way they did. And it's like, hold on, let's go in reverse a second, because a lot of people picked the Cowboys coming into this week. And we build it, and I think many people build it as like, this is a really big test. This is the Cowboys offense that has been rolling, had scored, 37 plus in 3 of their last 4 or something like that. Again, the highest total offense in football.
A lot of questions on how the Broncos offense was going to be able to keep up. Will the Broncos defense be able to slow them down? So many narratives going in.
So let's not let the result change what the questions were going in. And the question was, and kind of the way it was billed was, hey, this is a good Cowboys team that has struggled defensively, but offensively has been really good and tied the Packers a couple weeks ago. So the fact that the Broncos just beat them by 20 and really the Broncos kind of
controlled that game.
They settled things down. They could have probably won by more. Let's not overlook the fact that going into this game, it was billed as this highly competitive game because, yes, the Broncos ran away with it, but that's more of a credit to what they were able to do as opposed to, let's not diminish what the challenge was. So, I don't know how you could be any more excited after this game. Sean Payton clearly after the game was fired up about kind of the Broncos' performance and how they were able to control the game at the line of scrimmage. Their number one offense did not stand up against Denver's defense, and then the Broncos' offense just rolled. And so, again, it makes you think about, and it's still a week-to-week league, but I think last year there were times when you saw the Broncos beat the quote-unquote bad teams, but they didn't in those games against really good teams. Or even just kind of the middle-tier teams, there are times when they didn't quite play to that same standard. And this year, to see them win in this convincing fashion, it's like, man, I can't wait to see some of these games. I can't wait to see them play Houston and I don't know, it doesn't feel like they're 6-2, and then you look at the record and you're like, oh man, they've won 5 in a row and they're leading the AFC West.
Clearly, we're all in the culture because that's the culture here. You don't worry about the record. You don't worry about the win. You just focus it one game at a time, and we've clearly been doing that. And I think with this team, when you look at what they did against the Cowboys have now lost 8 straight games against the Denver Broncos, which was an interesting stat for me coming into. I actually didn't know that they kind of just didn't play well against them. And to your point that you're making, you can't move the goalposts just because you didn't get the result that people anticipated in terms of what this offense could do against this Denver Broncos defense. And it was just impressive to watch how balanced this team was. And I think one thing you brought up in last week's pod, or maybe it was a few episodes before, you had mentioned just the narrative of how Bo Nix is able to kind of shake things off and move on to the next. So many things happen in this game that you almost don't even remember Bo throwing that interception to start the game because the way that the defense was able to hold the Cowboys' offense to 3 points after a huge play to CeeDee Lamb to basically put them right there in position to score. Next thing you know, the Broncos come down, they score, and they just keep it going. You forget that, and I think that's what makes a championship team when you have that short-term memory of, okay, I made a mistake, let's move on to the next, and you have your team behind you and everything. And that's one of the things that I do respect about quarterback Bo Nix is his ability to do that at such a young stage in his career. A lot of quarterbacks don't learn how to do that or aren't built with that automatically in, and that's not a shot to anyone. It's just a matter of the fact of it takes time to develop that thing that you're not going to be perfect. And I think for Bo to go out there and have the performance that he did, given the emotional win that was in Week 7 versus the Giants, I think showed a lot about him. I think showed a lot about this offense, showed a lot about what head coach Sean Payton sees in Bo that the average person does not.
Yeah, well, I think the average person's starting to see it because how could you not when you watch him play last week in
some respect on it
in the fourth quarter against the Giants or this game against the Broncos. Now, I think offensively, despite the interception, I actually felt good about the offense even after the pick because you come out, J.K. Dobbins picks up 7 yards on his first run, then Bo finds Evan Ingram for 11 yards. And so it's like those first 2 plays, they're moving the ball. And that was the first time since week 2 that they'd gotten a first down on their opening drive of the game.
Wow.
So it had been a stretch, and we heard all week, we got to start faster, we got to start faster. They changed the way practice was structured, reports of changing the way they watched film, and it worked. And so even with the interception there, and still unclear to me if it was a poor throw or if miscommunication or kind of what happened there. Obviously, Bo's not going to come out and just say, oh, yeah, the route wasn't – like that's not how he's going to operate.
He's going to say, I dropped back and I threw to the team.
That's true. But the way that they moved the ball those first 2 plays, I was kind of thinking, okay, if the defense can – and I still wasn't clear at that point, what is the defense going to do? And they obviously come up with a big stop. But
Huge.
I thought it was clear based on that play or those 2 plays that this offense was going to be able to move the ball. And, man, did they move the ball. Whether it was Bo throwing the ball, and I think in particular he was really great. He stood in the pocket, and I think that was – he's been so good at getting on the run and throwing on the move. I thought in this game it was really impressive. There were several times where just Cowboys couldn't get any pressure. The Broncos' offensive line was there. He stood in the pocket and delivered great throws, whether it's to Troy Franklin for a long touchdown, whether it was Troy Franklin's second touchdown where Bo kind of waits for that play to develop and Franklin's wide open.
Yeah.
He was super patient on the deep throw down the sideline to Cortland Sutton late in the game. Again and again, he made big-time throws, ends up with 4 touchdowns, no more interceptions after
the initial
that early interception. The Broncos scored touchdowns on 6 of kind of 8 meaningful possessions in the game. They score a touchdown on 4 of 5 possessions there in the first half. And any number you look at, it was like, hey, most points in the first quarter at home since 2019, I think, if I'm remembering properly, or just overall since 2019. Most points at home in the first half since 2013. Most points at home in general since 2014. Bo Nix becomes the first quarterback since Peyton Manning to have back-to-back 4 total touchdown days. And he, John Elway, and Peyton Manning are the only players to win 3 games for the Broncos with 4+ touchdowns. So
it's elite company that you're in right there.
Yeah, you're just seeing what Bo Nix is capable of. And I know that for whatever reason that like nationally has maybe not gotten the attention. You look at that draft class last year, Bo still leads all quarterbacks in touchdown passes, passing yards, and wins. And I know that like Drake May is playing at an unbelievable level, and we know what Jaden Daniels did last year, and there's flashes from Caleb Williams and J.J. McCarthy at times, but like Bo's at number 1. And so I think you're right that like as the Broncos keep winning, I'll be interested to see like what is the national perception. Is it, hey, Bo is one of those guys, or is it, oh, they're, or is that not what it is? And I think Bo post-game kind of said, I don't really care. Like, he's not worried about that. And I thought you saw him play freely on Sunday. But, man, when he's making those throws, and then he didn't do it as much.
It was seamless. It was very
against
seamless.
The Cowboys, but I don't think he ran. Yeah, he didn't run yesterday. He didn't need to. But, like, when you mix in those throws with his ability to run and the competitiveness and there's clearly some sort of, like, clutch gene there that he has. I think you combine all that, and I talked a minute ago about, hey, what's the potential of this team? What can they be? So much of it is like, if Bo Nix plays at that level, this is a team that can win playoff games. This is a team that can win the division. This is a team that can go on and compete for a championship. And this is kind of like what it looks like at its best. And Mike McGlinchey said, listen, the NFL, we're not going to score 44 every week. It's just not realistic. But he did say, this is what it can look like, and so we kind of know what we're striving for and what it can be. And I think, even if you can get closer or closer than the last few weeks, with this defense, you're going to have a really good chance to win a lot of football games. What an impressive day from Bo in this offense.
Bo during the week had talked about how the guys on this offense have an edge, and he's like, we're all waiting. Everyone's tired or wants to get over that hump. This is what getting over the hump looks like. You score a season high in points in week 7 with 33, and then you come back the following week and score another season high and set the new season high with 44 points. And I think this is what it looks like. And to your point that you made earlier of like Broncos country having to get used to, like, everyone's kind of waiting for the shoe to drop. And it's like the thing about this team is that even if it drops, they're ready for it. And that's what they've learned from the heartbreaking losses against the Colts, against the Chargers, and internalizing those to not have to feel that, again, or at least do what they can with that's within their control to not feel that again. And I think that's a big part of it. And when you look at the second year guys that really put on a show yesterday, Troy Franklin had his first career game with 2 receiving touchdowns. I actually saw a tweet that was I enjoyed it. Des Bryant had tweeted out on November 11, 2023, Troy Franklin, remember the name, he's a him. And then he quote tweeted himself yesterday and said, I hate it's happening against my Cowboys, but check the date. And so you're kind of seeing the recognition that's coming for Troy. And he had a great training camp. He prided himself in wanting to be a guy that you can count on. In week 7, he had crucial, 2-point conversion completions. And then you have this game where he has 2 big touchdowns to really extend the lead on this team. So what did you see from Troy and kind of the development that you're kind of watching play out between him and Bo?
Yeah, I think it's what we saw in training camp, in that it's not just the deep stuff, right? It's all these intermediate routes, and then it's the route running. The second touchdown, he's wide open because of a great route where the corner thinks he's going to the middle of the end zone, and he breaks outside, and he's all alone. I think with Troy, man, if we know how we talk about Cortland, but like how he's reliable and all that, I still don't want to take it for granted, because like the deep catch he made was terrific. Yeah. And I know he wants the one back in the middle of the end zone, but overall, like, it was a relatively quiet day for Court, and he still had 4 for 67 yards. And so I don't want to, gloss over what he's doing, because it's important. But then if you can add to that with Troy, who yesterday had 6 catches for 89 yards and 2 touchdowns, and last week he had the touchdown, so now 3 touchdowns in the last 2 weeks. And then Ingram, he was 4 for 36, also drew a big pass interference call. So you're looking at 5 for that was probably like a 25-yard pass interference call, like 5 for 60. You got Marvin Mims, who didn't officially record a catch, but had that 32-yard pass interference that he drew. I've always thought that the pass interference, like, the receiver should get those, because it's not fair to Marvin. Like, Marvin did everything he needed to draw that, and the Broncos get the ball down there, but then Marvin gets no yards on the stat sheet. It doesn't feel fair. Bo doesn't get those yards. You add the 32-yard pass interference call on the Mims, and then where was the Ingram? 17 yards on that one. I mean, Bo's like right around 300 yards if you get that. So I don't know, maybe worth considering, NFL.
Well, we'll bring it up at the next annual meeting.
That's true. That's a good point. That's a good call out. But I think it's about Troy kind of translating the performance in training camp that I think we saw early in the year, like in Indy, right? And then it went a little quiet, and he had a stretch where there were a couple, I don't want to say they're drops, but against New York, he had one on the sideline where it's in his hands and then it gets punched out late. Kind of actually had one against the Cowboys as well. He has the fumble against the Jets. So just kind of a tougher stretch where he wasn't seeing the same amount of targets or maybe the same production, but the season is it comes and goes in waves, and he's now at a point where, you hope this propels him. And if, again, we talk about the potential, if the Broncos have 3 or 4 guys and it's like, okay, you want to take Cortland Sutton out of the game? Okay, Troy Franklin and Marvin Mims and Evan Ingram and Pat Bryant, like, they're going to eat you up. Yeah. Or you want to take Cortland Sutton out of the game, we're going to run the ball. And Dobbins had 111 yards. He didn't even carry the ball that many times, 15 attempts, and some of those came late in the game after he was already over 100. Still averaged 7.4 yards per carry. Harvey, 7 attempts for 46 yards for 6.6 yards per carry. I mean, the run game was spectacular yesterday against the Cowboys. And so when listen, it was a historic in some ways offensive performance. You're not going to get that every single week, but I do think it shows the potential, and it shows, hey, what are things that, like, Houston, as you're preparing defensively this week for this Broncos offense, what do you worry about? Like, you try to stop the Broncos run game, you really focus on that. Okay, well, they've got Sutton and Franklin, and we'll see what happens with Mims. Pat Bryant, like there's those options. Okay, you want to shut down Sutton? Well, maybe Franklin can go. You can go after that number 2 guy like Derek Stingley, a really good corner for Houston. Last time the Broncos played, he was on Cortland Sutton. So, do you find another area to attack? But this is not like some of the years in the past where it felt like the options maybe were limited in terms of where you were going with the football. The Broncos have options now. They've got guys that can make plays. It just kind of transforms what you can do.
I think this offensive line doesn't get enough credit sometimes. I mean, we've talked about the run game. We've talked about the receivers. But the way that this line has protected Bo so that he can make his reads and, hit his targets. I saw a stat that they've only allowed 8 sacks so far this season on Bo. And the Broncos are the first team in NFL history with 35-plus sacks on defense and 10 or fewer sacks allowed in the first 8 games of a season. So what this offensive line is doing to just create those gaps for JK, for Harvey, protect Bo as much as possible for him to either decide to run or, obviously connect with Sutton, Franklin, Pat Bryant, so many of his weapons down the field, I think is very key. And I think they take a lot of pride in that too, in understanding like we're here to kind of be that line of defense. Also, they were joking, Quinn Miners was joking that, when RJ Harvey had like his second touchdown, he was like, all right, like you're going to have to do more celebrations here. Like he's like, once he scored, he just stood there. And I went up to him and I said, you need to like do something. We need to come up with some kind of celebration. Obviously, he did have that mile-high leap into the stands, it's for such a good picture. But you look at what these rookies were able to do, and I feel like when you have the rookies producing like they are, it frees up Cortland for like that big catch in the middle of the field. It frees up Troy to have the game that he has. And when I talked to Troy Franklin after the game, he said, we're going to need these rookies to do all they can because when they are firing at those levels, like, you see that development going and how it helps the rest of the team. And it's very telling of even last year when Troy was a rookie and when we had these other running backs that are rookies and kind of being like, okay, like they're helping push this offense along as they find their identity, as they find their groove. And I think with the way that Pat Bryant played, I was very impressed, not only for his first career touchdown, which congratulations to him, but just the dirty work he also puts in. Like, that man can block. One thing that he prides himself on, he said that he told the receivers and the running backs, hey, if you're looking for a good run, look for me, look for number 13, and I got you. And I think when you have a receiver that's not afraid to do that and really kind of do, like I said, the dirty work of it allows his offense to play a little smoother. But the rookies really put on a show yesterday. You can't stress it enough, from Jahdae Barron to RJ Harvey to Pat Bryant. It was really special to see them kind of hit that stride and come into their own at this point in the season.
Yeah, and I wouldn't say that, most people were worried and there were a few, like I saw a tweet a couple weeks ago that was like, oh, the Broncos draft class hasn't contributed, blah, blah. It's been 5
Maybe
weeks.
not on the stat sheet, but they've contributed.
Well, and it's also realized that like 5 games in or 6 games in to a long season of long careers. And it's also, you see rookies elsewhere, and it's not a shot, but like Cleveland, for example, has a lot of rookies contributing. Yep. Well, it's a struggling team that, is not right now competing for a playoff spot. The Broncos are in first place in their division. They've got a good roster. And so it's hard, I think, for like RJ Harvey hasn't gotten as many carries because J.K. Dobbins is playing. He's got the 3rd most rushing yards in the league, right? And Pat Bryant gets only so many snaps because you got Cortland Sutton and you've got Evan Ingram and you've got Troy Franklin and Marvin Mims. Like, Jahdae Barron is only getting so many snaps because you've got Pat Surtain and Riley Moss.
Yeah.
It's not like
it's a good problem to have.
Exactly. And so that's why, like, if you were playing all these guys a ton and you needed them to be immediate contributors, like last year, for example, the Broncos did need certain guys to be immediate contributors. And if Bo Nix, for example, struggled the whole year, it would have been tough. But this is one of the luxuries of having a roster that's deep and that you've built up, is that these guys have time to adjust. Now, Sean Payton did say Monday, it's not like you don't have 2 or 3 years to acclimate. Like, you've got to get going now, and they need these guys, and it's vital for them to contribute. But I think the fact that you saw it on Sunday is a good sign for the rest of the year, and it certainly was encouraging. And RJ Harvey has 3 touchdowns. He's the first Broncos rookie since Clinton Portis to have 3 touchdowns in a game. Obviously, we know how good Clinton Portis was here early in his career, and so anytime you're mentioned kind of in that breath is impressive. Pat Bryant makes the nice catch. You mentioned the blocking as well. He sealed off a guy on R.J. Harvey's run.
He did the Mile High Salute.
Yeah, he did. He forgot to get the football, but he did the Mile High Salute.
He's like, I was more focused on doing that than the football because I know how important it is to do that. I know. It went back with his mom. Yeah, I love that his mom was here to watch him get his first touchdown in the NFL. That's special. And
then Barron just running stride for stride. I believe it was Ferguson there that Dak Prescott was targeting. He gets his first pick.
Yeah.
We'll see. No update on Pat Surtain, but we'll see if Barron needs to take on a bigger role here. But this is what you're hoping to see from these rookies. And, it was a young team a year ago. I think you're a little more veteran now, but still, the more that a guy like R.J. Harvey can contribute or Barron can contribute or Pat Bryant, again, it gives defenses, it gives offenses more things to worry about, and it helps you as a group. And, again, if Harvey plays like that as a complement to J.K. Dobbins, this run game can be one of the best in the league. And I asked Sean on, what day is it, Monday, where have the Broncos grown the most over the last few years? Where have they, or last few weeks, and where have they improved? He always talks about the race to improve.
Yeah.
And Sean Payton said a number of things, but one of the things that stands out to me is the run game and that it's gotten a lot better. And the run defense with Malcolm Roach coming back has gotten better. And so controlling the line of scrimmage, you mentioned the offensive line. I think the defensive line's the same way. If you can win up front in this league, you're going to win a lot of football games, and it feels like the Broncos have done that. And now they've got this confidence to them, this swagger, and you hope that you can keep that moving forward as they get ready for another big one.
It's interesting to think back where we started in training camp, right? And looking on paper and saying like, wow, there's Evan Ingram. We have J.K. Dobbins. We got this rookie named R.J. Harvey who has really good vision. And you're seeing everything on paper. When you actually see it on the field and seeing how it's playing out, it's very special to understand like what the Broncos are building here and the right pieces that they put into place. J.K. Dobbins spoke about that after the game on Sunday, where he said, like, as we go through the weeks, I'm just proving myself right, that I made the right decision to come here, that I made the right decision to come to the Denver Broncos. And he's like, because we're just still scratching the surface of what we can do. He's like, I can be better. I can shake off certain blocks. He's like, what me and my boys are doing in the running back room, he's like, is special. He's like, I don't know, what's happened before with the run game, but I know we're transforming that. And so I think when you have that veteran leadership mixed in with no big egos, this is Evan Ingram that, is playing. This is Cortland Sutton that is playing, and they're not worried about their targets. They're not worried about their yards. They're worried about winning the game and having the right pieces there to win the game. And I think when you look at just how this offense is really complementing each other, when the offense is playing like that, the defense is able to play a little more freely. And offense, obviously, joking was like, I know the defense probably enjoyed us scoring a lot more. Cortland Sutton said that he's like, I say it probably every time I talk to the media, but like, I'm so impressed with this defense and just kind of sit in awe of what they're able to do. And when you're able to watch a balanced game, you mentioned it in the instant analysis that if you miss it, you can watch it on youtube.com, on the Denver Broncos official YouTube channel. You mentioned you weren't like freaking out, you weren't sweating, because like this was just the game that you expect the Broncos to play because they have the talent, they have the coaching in play, and the defense obviously shined very brightly and showed why they're one of the best in the league.
Yeah, this was, again, I talked at the beginning of it changes your perception of what this team can be. Mm-hmm. This is what you're waiting to see. And I've talked again and again.
It's a beautiful view, yo. It's a beautiful view.
It is. I've talked again and again about, like, at a certain point, to thrive in these big games or thrive in the playoffs, you've got to beat offenses like this, and you've got to find a way to limit them. And it doesn't mean you have to hold them scoreless, but you've got to find a way to make big plays or game-changing plays. And we talked about, hey, can you get a couple stops? Can you get a couple turnovers? Can you get a red zone stop? And boom, the Broncos did all of that. They get that early red zone stop that sets the tone. And it's worth noting the third down they do without Pat Surtain on the field. They're able in the second half to play without Pat Surtain. This is a Cowboys offense that came in best in the league. Dak had gone 4 consecutive games with 3 touchdowns, no picks. He throws no touchdowns, has 2 picks, 51.5 quarterback rating, which is his lowest of the season, 188 yards, which I believe is his second lowest of the season. The Broncos only get to him twice for sacks, but they impacted him the whole day. Hold Javonte Williams.
Comfortable, yeah.
Yeah, Javonte Williams was third in the NFL in rushing. He had 13 carries for 41 yards. Did have 2 short touchdowns, and nice to see Javonte, still doing good things, but they held him in check. George Pickens, CeeDee Lamb, they combined for 14 catches for 152 yards. I think if you're the Broncos, you would have signed up for that, just from a stat line perspective. Ferguson, 1 target, no catches. He came in as the leading tight end in the league. We talked about how he was like on pace to break all sorts of records.
Yeah.
And I just, we talked too about, hey, the Cowboys are going to make plays. How do you respond?
Yeah.
And there were times when they made plays, like they got a big third down conversion to George Pickens that puts them, might have even been a PI early in the game, that puts them down on the goal line. Okay, you respond by holding them to a field goal. Cowboys come out and score a touchdown, and then, they're trying to cut the lead toward the end of the first half. Jahdae Barron gets a big interception. You get another big interception with them driving late. There were just enough, it was better than I expected. I think in a lot of, I thought the Cowboys were going to score in the mid-20s and that this was going to be kind of a back-and-forth game, and that maybe the Broncos could, pull away late, or they get a big interception in the second half. But really, this defense was good enough from the get-go that it never became that. And the Cowboys were trailing essentially the whole time. And the Broncos offense, we talked about it last night, they doubled up in terms of they're down 3-0, they score, they get a stop, they score again. So instead of the Cowboys being able to stick with their game plan, they're down 10 points before you even really know it. And then they're chasing the rest of the game. That helps the defense. They only gave up 1 play of more than 20 yards to Dak Prescott when he was in there. And it was to CeeDee Lamb. That was on the very first drive of the game. That was the one that set up the goal line stand, essentially. After that, not a single play of more than 18 yards that Dak Prescott had. He had one that was 19 with a penalty, but otherwise just a masterclass from the defense in terms of holding a really good offense in check. CeeDee Lamb, George Pickens, Jake Ferguson, Javonte Williams, and Dak, who was playing at an MVP level. Everybody was talking coming in about Dak is the MVP. He's the only reason this Cowboys team is remotely relevant.
Yeah. And
the Broncos, again, handed him one of his worst performances of the season, if not in some time longer than that. So what an effort from the defense. I think it shows. They did get a couple takeaways, but they're still able to do it without takeaways, which is impressive. And it gets me excited for down the road of hey, and there's important games until then, but in a few weeks the Chiefs are going to come here, right? And you're on this collision course to some degree of, hey, the Chiefs and Broncos, and the Chargers still to some degree, the Chiefs and Broncos are someone's got to knock the Chiefs off to take this division, right? That will be the story in a few weeks. Houston, Vegas, you got to find a way to win those, but but the Chiefs coming to town in 3 weeks, that's the battle that people are going to be so fired up for. I'm sure it'll be the number, Jim Nantz will be back, I'm sure. And
if not, we're inviting you back.
That's right. And when you see the defense play like this and you see the offense play like this, it gets you excited for what they can do against a top offense, because you just saw them do it against a top offense. And again,
the top offense.
Yeah. And this whole thing circles back of if this is the level they can play at, I don't see any reason that they can't end this streak. And so they still got to do it, and there's still a long way to go. You still got half the season where hey, the Broncos are 6-2. You might have to get to 12 wins. You might have to get to 13 wins even to realistically knock the Chiefs off. But when they play like that, I think it's reasonable to start thinking about, can they do it? And defensively, this is what and not just did it look like this, it looked like this for the second half when Pat Surtain wasn't in there.
Yeah.
Which
says a lot.
The Cowboys, they came out throwing. They were going to push the ball down the field. They still only scored 7 points. And, this is not a Cowboys team that lacks weapons. You're not doing this against a team that has one guy or, or doesn't have a true number one. They've got 2 true number one receivers and potentially the top tight end in the league.
Yep.
They scored 7 points. I know I'm not counting the Joe Milton. Sorry, Joe Milton. It was a beautiful throw. Terrific throw. Maybe the best throw anybody made all day outside of the Pat Bryant touchdown pass. But I'm not counting it in terms of like what happened in this game. Okay? That's my decision.
That's fair.
My decision. You have to respect it. They allowed 7 points to Dak in the second half, despite them being aggressive, despite them pushing the ball down the field, despite the Broncos probably like not wanting to give up the big play and hanging back a little bit compared to the first half. 7 points. Yeah. And when you see them do that, it makes me excited about what they can do moving forward. And again, we'll see what happens with Surtain, but like they showed that it's more than just Surtain, and Bonito didn't have a sack. It's still more. It's more than Nick Bonito. It's more than just, I think nationally, and I get it, right? Like it's impossible nationally to know every player on every team. And so big names, big stars are going to stand out. But Jonathan Cooper, Zach Allen, Dondre Tillman, Jonah Ellis coming back, Hufanga, who's playing as good as anybody in the league at the safety position, I'm sure. Riley Moss, I know, drew some flags, but like he competed and
I love his aggressiveness. Yeah.
Riley is fun to watch. Mm-hmm. You get Dre Greenlaw back this week. Yep. So this is a defense that playing at a really high level. And what's next? I want to see what's next.
You're like, fast forward. I mean, you look at the receivers, and as you mentioned, George Pickens only had 78, CeeDee Lamb had 74. The Broncos still have only one wide receiver at this point in the season have over 100 yards, and that was Devontae Smith from the Philadelphia Eagles. And that says a lot because it says a lot about the secondary. It says a lot about the depth of this team. Jonathan Cooper was asked about Tillman's interception, and he just said, like, look, if I don't get it, someone else is. And that's what this team is all about. It's about picking each other up and finding ways that if I don't make the play, someone else behind me is going to come and make that play for me. And they play so well together, and the way they mesh together is beautiful to watch. Again, like I've said it probably every podcast, defensive girly here. So it's like I understand, to me, like when I see this defense go out there and play, and you don't need Nick Bonito's this game because everything else is working so well. You don't need this, you don't need that, but you have it. And I feel like that's going to unlock something as you kind of go on, for the rest of the season. And obviously, this is the reaction episode of the game that obviously we play on Sunday. And I know on Thursday we have the breakdown and go more in depth on the matchup with Houston. But just skipping ahead a little bit, we have the road game against Houston on Sunday, and they return back to face 2 AFC West opponents. How much are you looking forward to these next 3 weeks and what this team can do? We've talked about them needing to handle business. Well, they did that. They're checking off exactly what they're needing to do. Now they have this road trip right in between of this, 4 games home sense that they have. How do you see them responding as they go on the road?
Yeah, well, they just capped off a 4-0 October. It's the first time more than a decade that they've gone a whole month 4-0. So kudos to them. Sean Payton continues to be, his teams are just really good.
It gets spooky in October.
For other teams, it gets spooky. Yeah. I think that you earn the right when you're 6-2 to like play in bigger games. And Sean Payton talks about that a lot, is that like when you win these games, now the game in Houston becomes a chance to get to 7-2 and like add another win and keep yourself right in the division mix. If you're 3-3 or you're 4-4, like you're battling to be in the playoff mix. Yeah. The Broncos start to the season puts them in a position for more, where truly they are 1 game back of the 1 seed in the AFC right now, and they are leading the AFC West. Now, it doesn't guarantee anything. You've got to keep winning, and I think that that's where like the next step of this Broncos like season will be tested, or the next challenge of like, do you have the focus, the maturity to turn a 5-game winning streak into 6, 7, 8, 9? Like, that's where you'll see the ability of this team to, can they go from 6-2 to, like we talked about, 12-5, 13-4, better?
Yeah.
Or is it like, hey, you slip up over the next couple and you're at the bye, thinking about, man, how did we get to this point, right?
Right.
Like, are you 7-4? Like that at this point is going to feel not so great, even though at the beginning of the season, maybe 7-4, hey, sounds okay.
Yeah.
But now,
Expectations
if you're
are
not-
higher now.
Yeah, if you're not 8-2, 9-2, 8-3, like those are the sort of things that when you get to 6-2, it raises expectations. It changes what's possible, but you've still got to go out there and do it. Again, I've said this a lot of weeks now, especially ahead of certain big games. This is where you trust Sean Payton. Last week, he helped him turn the page from an emotional win, and there was no lapse at all. There was no hangover from the Giants when they got after him against Dallas. I feel like the same thing will be true here, that by the time we get to Wednesday, by the time we get later in the week, Sean Payton will turn this team's attention to Houston. I think it always helps when the other team wins the week before. Houston just had
maybe I said the same thing earlier today.
Maybe their best performance of the season against the 49ers. CJ Stroud played a great game. So if you're the Broncos, you've got to be – you can see what happens if you're not ready to go. This is as good a defense as they'll face all year. It might be a grind of a game. I think we've got to see kind of what happens on the injury front with some players, whether it's Surtain, Marvin Mims, that could impact the game. But I don't think that the Broncos' focus will be a problem because it hasn't been this year. And, again, that's where Sean Payton, the leadership, gets you ready to go. But, again, you're 6-2, but now each game almost becomes like 7-2 feels a lot better than 6-3. and as you win more games, your expectations become higher. And so, can you find a way to go out and get the next one? That's all that matters, is just finding a way to get the next one. And we can sit here and talk about, hey, the one seed or the division or kind of what's waiting down the road, some of these big games, but you've got to find a way to continue to stack these because, listen, big picture against, with the Chiefs, they're coming. And you're going to need every single win you can possibly get. And I think one thing that it's okay for us to start talking about is the ability to have a home playoff game in a Power Field a Mile High with a 9-game active home win streak. The difference between that and going to, say, Indianapolis or Buffalo or New England or Kansas City or whoever it is, Baltimore, Pittsburgh, like the difference in those
is huge.
It's significant. And so you've put yourself in a good position through 8 weeks. All that means is that you got to keep winning.
Keep winning is the tale of the tape. And you look at the AFC, Patriots are 6-2, Steelers are 4-3, Colts are 7-1, Broncos 6-2 as the leader division. The teams behind them, 5-3, 4-3, 4-3, except for the AFC East, where the Bills are right there at 5-2. The Broncos have also played very well against the NFC East, 3-0, and those division opponents, they only have the Commanders left to face in that. And you bring up a good point with the Chiefs, and we'll close it out here. But just interesting, like for a lot of people, that is the measuring stick. Like regardless of what the Broncos have done so far, it's like okay, but you still have to face the Chiefs, and like now the Chiefs are finding their rhythm within their offense. They're 4-3 right now, which is not indicative of how they're playing. Obviously, they still have their key playmakers. They still have Patrick Mahomes. And I know this is not to overlook Houston or the Raiders game because Raiders are on primetime Thursday, so you're going to be coming off of Houston on a short week. And so it's going to be interesting to see how that all plays out. But this AFC battle and really it's stacked. And I think the way you're looking at the Jaguars stuff that come to town in a few weeks. Obviously, they play the Raiders. You're going to play the Chargers later on in the season, and that's going to be really indicative because you played them at the start of the season. So it's going to be really interesting to see how you see like the arc of growth over the course of that. But we look ahead to Houston. Pack your bags. Excited. It's going to be fun seeing CJ Stroud going against Bo Nix, and then obviously the defense having another big test to just go out there and show what they can do.
Yeah, the Chiefs game is like on the horizon, and it's close enough now that I know people will start talking about it. But 8-2 heading into that game is a whole lot better than any other record. So you gotta, you cannot. And I think the Texans have shown you their defense certainly is something you're not going to overlook, and this offense seems to be getting it going. This is going to be a tough test, and so the Broncos have to be ready to go.
Well, Broncos country, we will break down that Houston-Denver matchup on Thursday on a new episode of Altitude Advantage, so make sure you guys stay tuned for that. If you missed anything from the Broncos' huge win over the Dallas Cowboys, make sure you guys head over to our social channels, our official YouTube channel, and DenverBroncos.com for our instant analysis, the best of locker room, sound, and so much more. Until then, I'm your host and team reporter, Elisa Hernandez, sitting across the table from our lead writer on DenverBroncos.com, Aric DiLalla. We will see you on Thursday.